with their moral and social themes, still posed no threat to Rodgers and Hammerstein, who seemed to own the box office.
How many, please?
One.
That will be $6.60.
What? $6.60 for one ticket?
I don't set the prices, sir.
I don't know.
Well, it's only $6.60 for the evening show. You can get the same seat for $4.40 in the afternoon.
Oh. Well, what are the morning prices? I mean, I don't care how early, you know.
They don't have any morning performances.
You mean Rodgers and Hammerstein don't make any money in the morning?
No.
Not in the morning, huh? Then why did they write that song about how beautiful it is?
Well, that's when they take it to the bank.
With half a century of experience between them, Rodgers and Hammerstein knew very well the business of show business. In order to control their own work and develop new properties, they became producers, knowledgeable, respected, and tough. Now everyone on Broadway felt the pressure to write a book musical.
The idea for Annie Get Your Gun came from Dorothy Fields. She took the idea to Rodgers and Hammerstein, who were producing musicals, and all she had to say was, a musical about Annie Oakley, starring Ethel Merman. And Rodgers and Hammerstein said, we'll do it.
To score the show, they ultimately turned to a man who wrote his first song in 1907, the incomparable Irving Berlin.
Call me up some rainy afternoon. I'll arrange for a quiet little spoon. Think of all the joy and bliss. We can hug and we can talk about the weather. I'll arrange.
Irving Berlin was very skeptical of these new kinds of musicals, which he called situation shows. And suddenly he was being asked, this old warhorse, to write songs that fit character and dramatic moment. But he took the script home, worked one weekend, came back Monday morning, and said, how does this sound for a, what he called, hillbilly musical? Doing what comes naturally. They say that falling in love is wonderful, and you can't get a man with a gun. 3 songs in one weekend. And Rodgers and Hammerstein looked at it, absolutely amazed, and said, we think this will do very nicely, Irving.
When I'm with a pistol, I sparkle like a crystal. Yes, I shine like the morning sun. But I lose all my luster when with a Bronco Buster. Oh, you can't get a man with a gun.
Among the showstoppers, Berlin wrote what has become the unofficial anthem of the American musical theater.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Even with a turkey that you know will fold, you may be stranded out in the cold. Still you wouldn't change it for a sack of gold. Let's go on with the show.
Annie Get Your Gun produced 8 hit songs, an unheard-of number for a single show, but the score did little to advance the new book musical form. It was old-fashioned, the critics said. Yes, Berlin agreed, nothing but good old-fashioned hits. Berlin was not the only veteran songwriter trying to stay current on Broadway.
In the late 40s, Rodgers and Hammerstein had become sort of the kings of Broadway musicals, and Cole Porter had several failures, and maybe people thinking he was a little passé. Then came Kiss Me Kate, and that speaks for itself. He was never passé.
Another opening, another show in Philly, Boston, or Baltimore. A chance for stage folks to say hello.
In 1947, when the writer Bella Spiewak suggested a musical version of Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew, Porter agreed to write the music and lyrics.
We open in Venice, we next play Verona, then on to Cremona. Lots of laughs in Cremona. Our next show is Parma. Let's go be mopey menace, then Mantua, then Padua, then we open again. Where? We open in Venice, we next play.
Kiss Me Kate featured a clever play within a play that intertwined a Shakespearean production with the tumultuous backstage romance of the leading couple.
Broadway was always breaking barriers. My first line in Kiss Me Kate was, "You bastard." And when I finally said it in the theater, the gasp from the audience was incredible. Oh, no. It's slightly different nowadays, isn't it?
Cole Porter led the way in writing adult songs about love and sex.
It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot. I'd like to sup with my baby tonight.
He wrote candidly. He defied the censors. He probably, more than any other songwriter in this century, made it possible for the openness that we have in all popular music.
'Cause it's too darn hot. It's too darn hot. It's too darn hot.
Cole Porter and Irving Berlin did not have to reinvent themselves because Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein had found a new way of doing shows. If anything, they simply needed to reaffirm their ability to do what they always did so well, which was to write great songs and create entertainment that the public liked.
With Kiss Me Kate's opening in December of 1948, Porter enjoyed the Broadway spotlight for 3 months before a new Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, South Pacific, opened to glowing reviews.
Some enchanted evening, you may see a stranger. You may see a stranger, but such a crowded room. And
One day, Porter heard Some Enchanted Evening on the radio, and a friend asked, who wrote that song? Rodgers and Hammerstein, Cole replied. If you can imagine it taking 2 men to write one song.
South Pacific was the show Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote that had to be a hit. They had written Oklahoma and Carousel, both of which were very, very successful. Then they wrote Allegro, and it was a kind of embarrassing failure. They needed their next show to be a hit, and South Pacific was that show. It hit a time in this country where there was still an emotional feeling about World War II.
After the war, soldiers returned to an America that had changed little in its treatment of minorities. Overseas, they had encountered people of all races, and some had even come home with war brides. James Michener illustrated the war's racial and cultural friction in his collection of stories, Tales of the South Pacific. Rodgers and Hammerstein, working with Joshua Logan, based their musical upon 2 wartime love affairs. A lieutenant from Philadelphia meets a beautiful island girl, and a nurse from the segregated South falls in love with a middle-aged French planter. Rodgers and Hammerstein had just one actress in mind to play the nurse, Mary Martin. Oscar had first met her in Hollywood before the war, when she was just an aspiring singer-dancer from the cowtown of Weatherford, Texas. 10 years later, Oscar wrote her the part of a lifetime. Though she loves the Frenchman, the nurse initially rejects him because he has fathered 2 mixed-race children.
In the South Pacific, a young American Navy nurse, explaining her race prejudice, says, "I can't help this. This is emotional. It was born in me." A young Marine lieutenant, played by my friend here, Bill Tabbert, says,
"It's not born in you. It happens after you're born. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught."
South Pacific produced quite a lot of backlash, particularly over the song You've Got to Be Taught, which a lot of people felt was unacceptable.
Oddly made, and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught.
Some businessmen came to see me and said, "Won't you ask Rodgers and Hammerstein to kill that song, You Have to Be Taught? Because it deals with interracial matters, and we don't like the idea of the guy being in love with the island girl anyway, and this song just rubs it in." The show was long. It would have been very easy to cut it. And Rodgers and Hammerstein asked me what I thought, and I said, "Well, if you cut that song, you cut the whole musical." And they said, "That's precisely what we think."
Instead of simply celebrating America's efforts in the war, South Pacific challenged the country to confront its deep-seated racial bigotry. For their achievement, Rodgers and Hammerstein and Josh Logan won the Pulitzer Prize.
You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught.
Luck be a lady tonight. Luck be a lady tonight. Luck if you've ever been a lady to begin with. Luck be a lady tonight.
The integrated musicals of Broadway almost always featured a gamble on love. And in 1950, the gamblers and gangsters of Damon Runyon's short stories found romance in the colorful world of Broadway itself. The show was Guys and Dolls.
Luck be a lady.
We called it a musical fable. See, Damon Runyon, he wrote a kind of an idealized New York fella. My theory was to treat these mugs as ladies and gentlemen. I wrote Guys and Dolls as though I were Noel Coward.
It was though all of our mugs and tough guys were the Seven Dwarfs, Disney characters. They were all lovable. Even our worst villain was a big teddy bear.
I had lived in New York all my life, frequently went on Broadway, saw the petty thefts and the gamblers and the evasive tricks that were carried on at the time. And my first job was to see if I could capture the general atmosphere in the opening scene of Guys and Dolls. The first 15 minutes of Guys and Dolls is all done musically, from the opening scene to the Mission Band coming on, singing Follow the Fold, followed by the three gamblers who go up to the newsstand and sing, I Got the Horse Right Here. His name is Paul Revere.
It's from a handicapper that's real sincere. I think it's Valentine, cause on the morning line, the guy's got him figured at 5 to 9. So make it if it's half, he wins it by a half. According to this here in the Telegraph. Epitaph, Valentine, Paul Revere, I got the horse right here.
Guys and Dolls had one voice because all the voices who made it happen talked in that same way. They all went to the same high school in Brooklyn. These were guys that knew this material. They had read Runyon as kids. And the guy who made the songs for this was maybe the truest mug of all, Frank Lesser.
I'd love to get you on a slow boat to China.
Lesser, maybe more than any other songwriter since Berlin, had an ear for that American vernacular.
He was able to speak the language of the people rather than write generalized songs about love and June and moon and all those things. When Nathan Detroit, who's having a falling out with Adelaide, says, "So sue me, what can you do me? I love you." That didn't exist in songs up to that point. People didn't talk that way in songs. They used songwriter language.
The best years of my life, I was a fool to give to
All right already. I'm just an old woodie. All right already, it's true. So new, so soon. What can you do? I love you. Oh, the prayer meeting. I forgot.
With a winning combo of song, dance, and comedy, Guys and Dolls became an instant classic, immortalizing the wise guy world of Broadway for generations to come.
It was uppermost in our mind to maintain Lefebvre quality, and at the same time, it was a kind of a street musical. It's all make-believe. Broadway itself, I think, is just, you look at it and it looks real. But what it's really about is once upon a time.
When some lazy slob gets a good steady job and he smells from Vitalis and Barbasol. Call it dumb, call it clever, but you can give odds forever that the guy's only doing it for some dough, some dough, some dough. The guy's only doing it for some
Hi-ho, everybody, and welcome to On Broadway Tonight.
Throughout the 1950s, the new medium of television raided Broadway talent for its programs, just as Hollywood had done 2 decades earlier. The prestige and sophistication of Broadway musicals was one of the top attractions for millions of eager television viewers. Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals were so popular that when General Foods presented a 90-minute tribute, the special preempted all the Sunday night programs and was broadcast on the 3 major networks simultaneously.
Let's get on with it. Now, let's see, who are you two again? Say, you're pretty famous. Every kid in the country knows you, Roy Rogers, huh? King of the Cowboys. Then this must be Trigger, huh?
No, this is Hammerstein.
Well, that's an odd name for a horse.
But it was Ed Sullivan's Sunday night variety show that was the most important showcase for Broadway musicals. Rodgers and Hammerstein appeared on the very first broadcast, and in 1951, accompanied by Gertrude Lawrence, they visited the Ed Sullivan Theater at 1697 Broadway.
You may be afraid, but you make believe you are. You may be afraid, but you make believe you
An appearance on Sullivan's top-rated program could turn a flop into a hit. Broadway songwriters Charles Strauss and Lee Adams even went so far as to write Sullivan into their score for Bye Bye Birdie.
Me on the Ed Sullivan Show?
It was art imitating life and back again when Paul Lynde led the cast in Hymn for a Sunday Evening.
Ed Sullivan! Ed Sullivan! Ed Sullivan! Ed Sullivan!
When I was about 19 years old, I auditioned for Richard Rodgers, and I belted out my aria and sang it as loud as I could. And when I had finished, Mr. Rodgers came up on stage and he said, "That was absolutely adequate." And I went, "Oh, really?" And then he cracked up and said, "No, it was wonderful and thank you." And he asked me if I had been auditioning for anything else for the coming season. And I said, "I have been speaking to Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Lowe for a musical that they're considering called My Fair Lady." And Rodgers thought about it for a moment and he said, "If they ask you, you should do My Fair Lady. But if they